Segment 3 of the Breeders' Cup preview is upon us. Mike and I will go over the final 4 races, beginning with the 9th race on Saturday and the 6th Breeders' Cup race on Saturday. And this is the Longines Breeders' Cup turf. We've actually got video footage of one of the Euros, and look at them charge down the stretch. The problem with that charge is there's a horse who's well in front of him, and that's the mighty Trev. But the Juddmonte horse you see splitting horses is Flintshire. And Flintshire, this is not your typical Breeders' Cup turf of recent years. This is a year where we're getting genuine Group 1 performers. Can Flintshire come back in that second in the arc and win this race?
Yeah, I think that he can. I think if he runs as well as he did in that race and this race, then I think that he will win this race. And I don't know, I don't know if you feel the same way about it. The two, between him and Telescope, the 2 Euros coming over, I think they're pretty tough to beat in this race.
Yeah, I do. Let's talk about Euros before we go to the American horses in here, and let's talk about Telescope in this race, who's my actual top pick over Flintshire. These are the 2 horses. I'm living and dying with these 2 horses. Telescope, the difference to me between Flintshire and Telescope, I think Flintshire may be a better horse. But Flintshire is coming a month after the arc, and I don't know that he's going to run his best race. Whereas Telescope, who probably ran back in the Juddmonte too quickly after his very good second, the King George, when he came back in 3 weeks and didn't run well, he's been pointing this race now for over 2 months. He is a genuine Group 1 European, and these horses, to me, are too good for our horses. If he shows up, he's going to be very tough along with Flintshire.
Yeah, and he's been pointed to this race, Telescope has, by a guy who's already won this race 4 times. He knows how to win this race. And listen, anybody who saw his race 3 starts back, that Hardwick, when he won by 7, knows that this is a really super talented horse. And I love he has that American style of race, and that's what I like about him. He has that stalking style with a little bit of positional speed. He's going to get a great trip from the inside.
Right, you got Sir Michael Stout, and then you've got Andre Fabre with these 2 horses. You got the right guys, and you've got the right horses. What about Brown Panther, who was the favorite when scratched in the post for the Canadian International? DC International hasn't been run for about 20 years. I think he's a mile and a half too short for him, especially in America. I don't think he's good as the aforementioned 2 horses, though he's talented.
I don't think he's as good as them either. He's maybe run some of his better races this year, going very long, 2 miles and races like that. But I feel like the cutback may not work for him. It's interesting. Our Timeform analysts in London feel like he may be a horse who they just go with in this race and try and go right to the front in this race and take this field as far as he can. Those would be interesting tactics for him because he is a good horse.
He's got the stamina to do it, so I don't see why they shouldn't take a shot doing it. Let's take a look at some American horses, and I think if you're talking about the Americans, you got to talk about Main Sequence. But he's been terrific. I mean, nothing short of sensational for Grand Motion. I think he's going to miss getting Regime Mirage, with all due respect to John Velasquez, who's ridden him perfectly. He's a tough horse to ride. He also is a horse who gets left. If he gets left in this race from post 12, he's going to find himself in a lot of early trouble. And this is a horse, though they tried the bigger stakes, he's more of a Group 2 or Group 3 in a European who's improved, but he's running against genuine Group 1 horses.
Yeah, he's running against better horses this time. And to take nothing away from his 3 Grade 1 wins over here, he's run well all 3 times, but he seems like he always misses the break. He's always trying to come from last, and I'm telling you, he's not coming from last and running down Flintshire and Telescope in this race. I don't think he can do it.
If these horses show up, they're just better than horses like Imagining and Twilight Eclipse. With all due respect, they're better horses. Now, Magician, last year's winner, unfortunately was taken out of the race yesterday. The horse who beat him in the Arlington Million, maybe the neatest story of this year's Breeders' Cup, Hardest Core, will be running. I think the fairy tale comes to an end, but he's a cool horse.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, how can you not like him and what this horse has done? He's 3 for 3 this year, and he's run well all 3 times, and this was sort of his crowning achievement when he ran down Magician in this race, but it just feels like this is even maybe 2 steps above that race.
And Magician was compromised by moving too soon because of the perceived slow pace. Had he gotten a more patient ride, he probably gets it done. I went with Telescope over Flintshire, Main Sequence. We just flip-flopped them. We're on the same page here once again.
Yeah, I'll just be using, like you, though, the 1 and the 7. Flintshire, Telescope are probably where I cut it off in the pick 4.
I agree. Now, I won't be cutting it off anywhere in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We may each give 3 choices. I have a feeling that Mike and I will be getting a lot of horses on our tickets. Now, the first race you got to watch is the horse to beat, and this is Rich Tapestry, a horse who very gamely gets it done. Now, did get a pace to run into, but I thought got a very good ride, was on the pace, taken back off it, and still gamely ran down Golden Sense, who might be better than any horse that's running in this race. Secret Circle ran well, coming off the layup, finished 3rd, and we'll get to him. I think he's the horse to beat. I just don't totally trust him.
That's exactly how I feel about him. I do think he's the horse to beat, but the longer I look at him, and that race that he's coming out of, it was a really good win for him, but there wasn't that much pace going on in that race. And I don't know about you, Andy. I thought he got a perfect trip. Sitting in behind as the other four lined up and then making the last run. He beat a good horse. He beat two good horses, two Breeders' Cup winners in that race. But this is a totally different scenario for him. They're going to be going fast in this race. And I just wonder if he's going to be able to keep up and then still make the same run.
Well, maybe he's going to be better if he's able to sit back farther. Maybe the pace it wasn't a slow pace, but slower than the one in here didn't work for him. I just wonder if he's going to run his best race second time in the country. Now, Secret Circle, I didn't get him last year when he won the race, and here he is winning the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year. He was his second race in a year and a half, and I don't know that he's that fast. He showed that he can rate a little bit, which I guess is a bit of a feather in his cap. I don't know. I suppose he can win this race. I can't take him.
I don't want him on top either. He can win this race. The thing about that win last year with him was that was a division all year long that was waiting for a horse like him, who hadn't been around all year. These horses that were running in the graded stakes sprints all summer last year, they just weren't that good. They were waiting for a horse like him to come off the bench and beat them.
How much better, though, is this year's
It's not that much better. That's what he has going
deeper,
for.
I think. I just don't think that there are any superstars in here. Here's Private Zone. He's trying again. Here he is with a sensational game victory in the Vosburg. Here's Palace and Salutos Amigos finishing third and fourth. Salutos Amigos came back and he won the race last week, the Bold Ruler, and he's shipping out there. Good luck to him. Palace didn't run his race. For me, Private Zone can't get away with the kind of moderate first quarter he did in this race. He's not going to be successful, much like he wasn't successful last year, but Palace gets more to run into, and we'll talk about Palace a little bit after that, but what do you think?
Yeah, Private Zone, he's a cool game horse, but all of his big races come when he has the best of it on the front end, and he's not having the best of it on the front end of this race.
What about Palace? Can he ship his act out to California? He certainly gets the pace to run it.
I think he can. He's going to get the right setup in this race. He runs every time. I was a little disappointed initially in his Vosburg, but the longer you get away from that race, it just felt like he maybe didn't have his best chance, or that pace wasn't coming back for him.
Especially when you look at how well Salutos Amigos ran when he ran last week. And unlike Salutos Amigos, Palace didn't run last week. Want to see Mike Hushin get a Breeders' Cup. Be great to see Linda Rice get one. I think she has a big shot to get it with Palace. I don't think we have the Bing Crosby. I want to talk about Big Mocker a little bit in this race. I know he's more of a speed type. I think he's a little sneaky in here, and he's going to be a fifth or sixth use for me in the Big Four.
Yeah, I mean, he's won a Grade 1 this year. How can you really knock this horse? We'll see what happens. My problem with him was the two big races he ran, the Grade 2 and the Grade 1 wins this year, both on races that we had at TimeforMUs, relatively moderate paces. And this is going to be a much faster pace. And he was a total no-show last time in the Pat O'Brien.
He was awful last time. Something went wrong last time. I'm hoping the fact that he's coming back here and working well, he's behind. That got it behind him. Listen, he's not he's one of my six top choices here, a little bit lower than Secret Circle. What about Work All Week? In some ways, he's one of the more fascinating horses running on this Breeders' Cup card. This is a horse that's undefeated on dirt. He's 9 for 9 on dirt. I thought he ran well in Keeneland to get it done. My reservation with him is these kind of horses don't usually show up with their best efforts in the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, they really don't. I have the same reservation. He's a really cool horse, and he's fast. His top speed figures on our TimeformUs speed figures, they put him there. He's fast enough to win, but, man, there's a lot of speed for him to deal with in this race. And he won a Grade 3 last time. He's facing better horses here.
He is facing better horses. He's chasing from the outside. Bourbon Courage. He finally did what I wish they had done with him a year and a half ago. They made a mistake because he finished second in the Dawn, I think, a long, long time ago. He's a sprinter. My problem is I would have liked him turning back. He drew post 14. He didn't beat anybody at Keeneland. I think you think he's better in this race than I do.
Well, I fell for him in this race for all those reasons because I've been waiting for them to turn him back, too. This is a horse who is Grade 1 quality for sure. Maybe he's not anymore, but he was. And those races were just too far for him. The Don, the Clark, all these New Orleans handicap, all these races too far for him. They're finally turning him back. I liked his win off the layoff there when they finally sprinted him. Maybe it's too tough for him, and maybe I'm just being ridiculous putting this horse on top. But I don't love this sprint division. There's pace for him to run into, and I'm just going to take a shot with this horse at a very big price.
And even though he's on the pace, I'd like to leave those picks up because I want to talk about some other horses. But even though he's on the pace last time at Keeneland, he's not going to be anywhere near the pace in this race. No way. And maybe he'll even run better, and I think that's what your hope is. You've got Salutos Amigos third over Palace. Why?
I know it's sort of counterintuitive to think this horse who just ran 7 days ago can fly across the country and run another big race, but he's done nothing but run big races for David Jacobson, one after another since he took over his training. And I thought his Bold Ruler last time, it comes back a little slow, but I thought that's maybe the best race that he's ever run, and he's going to have pace to close into here. I think he's a better closing sprinter.
Okay. I thought Windfire was a little bit interesting. I flirted with putting him on top, but I didn't think I had any solid ground to stand on. He's really a Group 2, Group 3 type sprinter over in Europe, which isn't very good. Their turf sprinters aren't that good. But he's also got a dirt pedigree. Yeah. His second dam is Dream Supreme. His dam is a Half the Majestic Warrior. This horse isn't bred to be riding the turf. This horse is actually finally going to the correct surface. Maybe he's the kind of horse the race falls apart and get a piece. I was thinking about Sheik Al-Badu, who probably had better turf form coming in this race. This horse may have better dirt form. I don't want to leave him out as a bomb. I want to use some price horse in this race. On your say-so, I'll throw in Bourbon Courage. Maybe I'm a little bit of a homer with Palace, but I think the race sets up. I'll tell you the truth. I went in this race thinking I don't like Palace at all. The more I looked, I thought he has a real chance to win it. And I think a lot of people will think, he's a Yorkshire shipping here. He's a cheap horse. He's not going to get it done. This hard knocker shows up every time. A very interesting Breeders' Cup sprint. The mile, though, the Turf Mile, I think the Turf Mile is the best race of the entire week, and I'm looking forward to it. You know, we'll talk about Seek again first, who was totally stopped moving inside. Here he is weaving his way through traffic in the 4-star Dave. Gets stopped, re-rallies. My problem is, Mike, he drew an outside post. He is a horse that they have publicly stated needs to be inside of horses to do his best running, so I almost think this trip gave him the energy to get it done. Right. And I just think he's going to be a horse that's always going to have to thread the needle, and he's facing, I mean, he got by Grand Arch in that race. With all due respect, I don't want to be too tough on Grand Arch. Right. He's a nice horse. He's nowhere near the Euros he's facing here. Yeah,
Grand Arch and Sayad in his last couple of races, and they're just not up to the level of the horse he's running against here. And what happens with a horse like him, because of the way he has to be ridden, is what happened to him last time in the Shadwell Turf, where it doesn't open up and you get stopped and then you can't win.
And he's got to get to the inside from post 12 in a 14-horse field with a reasonably short run of the first turn. And then he's got to negotiate the traffic in that big field. Not impossible, and if anyone could do it, Joel Rosario can. If he does, I will bow to the horse and to Joel. It is a tough task. Now, Tradestorm, who is inferior to the Europeans that we're going to see in this race, who beat a filly that won our Pebbles by a neck in a subsequent start, got the sensational ride by Jamie Spencer, was able to weave through traffic and run down Bobby's Kitten, may not even been bested here. I don't see how this effort can win the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile for him.
Yeah, I don't think it can either. And the thing about it is that he just got the perfect trip with Bobby's Kitten, making a fast pace and getting contested, and this horse just came running at the end with a perfect run up the inside. That effort's not beating this field.
What about Obviously, who I've been surprised to hear how many people have been a fan of this horse. Here he is running off the Shoemaker Mire, beating a couple horses who I don't think are impossible here in Summer Front and Tom Tribute. In fact, Tom's Tribute of the Americans, he might be the one I use because I just like this horse. I think a mile's perfect for him. I think that Obviously, at the very least, going to have to deal with the next horse we're going to take a look at. And I know he turned his head in the gate. He blew the brake last time and it cost him the win. I just find it hard to believe he's going to be as top of his game and beat these horses. And isn't Taurus going to be breathing down his neck?
Yeah, I feel like there's enough speed to keep him certainly honest up front in this race. Look, and he's a fast horse. And if he just somehow speed pops this field, he might still be sitting there. Yeah, obviously. He might still be sitting there in mid-stretch, and you're wondering if anybody's going to get him. I think that was the case a couple of years ago when Wise Dan finally got him. But, boy, it's a tall order for this horse.
How about Tourist? Can he possibly deal with Obviously and beat these? I don't see it happening. I like him as a horse. You're going to have to leave those picks up for a long time because we've got a lot of Europeans to talk about.
I just feel like Tourist is running in this race the wrong year. I don't feel like this is the year to run him in this race. I think maybe next year might be the perfect year to run him in this race.
I don't disagree, and I'm very interested to see what he does going forward. Let's start with Toronado as we talk about the Europeans. He's the most highly regarded. I know he lost to Kingman. I don't think he should have lost to Charm Spirit, though he got through inside that race. I think he's got a little bit of hang in him, and that's why I put him second. But he's clearly got the best running lines against the best horse of anybody in this race. But he feels like I'm going to try to beat him, but obviously he's a big unit.
He is. He's the horse to beat in this race. I don't think there's any two ways about it. But I have that same nagging feeling about him that you do, that I feel like he might have a little bit of hang in him.
What about Anadin, a horse that I've got third? You don't have anywhere in there. That's the 9 horse. For my money, in his last race, he really, he had a bit of a he had some trouble in that race. Like he checked a little bit, and he didn't get a chance to do his best running. I think he's a player in this race for the same connections, of course, as Goldakova.
I think this is a younger half-brother to Goldakova, as a matter of
Maybe
fact.
right.
So, yeah, we'll see. I agree with you. He had trouble in his last race. He did not get a clean run in there. My problem with him isn't going back in his prior races. It does sort of feel like Toronado's a better horse.
He is a better horse. He beat him 2 lengths in the Queen Anne. He may have some room to move forward. What about Mustajab, who you have third in this race?
I thought he was a really interesting European, and maybe one. I thought about putting him ahead of Tornado in this race, and I ultimately decided not to. He's a 3-year-old who's on the improve. I liked his. I know he was defeated last time at even money. I thought he ran very, very well in that race. Yeah,
I thought he hung.
Did. You thought he hung in that race?
I thought he had a good trip in there. He was even money, and he hung, and I just think he's meeting better horses. Listen, I'm not saying he can't win here. I wasn't enjoying his last race. You and I have different Euros on top. Mike, I wanted to have your horse on top, Caraconte. I can't take him from post 14. I'll have him somewhere in my play for Insanity Insurance, but I think the post position buried him.
I think it did too. When I saw that he drew out there, I thought I have to find somebody else now, and then I went back to him. He's going to be a big price, and I feel. And listen, he's good enough to win this race. His races are very, very good. There were 2 Europeans that I liked who both drew post 14 in these races. Qualify earlier, and this horse, I put this one on top.
You're the jinx. For people that don't realize it, and I had talked about him earlier, Mike, he had a monster trip last time. He was steadied early. He was steady in the stretch of that race. He had no chance. He's not a mile and 5/16 horse. That's why he didn't run well in the Jockey Club at Chantilly. His race, the Poule d'Essai, the French Guineas, I ran very well to win that race. This is a seriously talented horse. I just hate the draw.
I hate the draw, too.
Now, I think Veda, the filly, is very, very dangerous, and she's the one that I have on top in this race. And my feeling with her is she needed her last race. She was running off a 4-month layoff in there, and I think she was getting that race as a prep for here. These are very sharp connections. The trainer's 2 for 9, won the E.P. Taylor, won another stake race as well. Coming for the Aga Khan. The Aga Khan horses don't ship the Breeders' Cup unless they feel they're live. She was second to Avenir Certain, who's a superior French filly. She easily beat Excellence. I know Excellence didn't pan out here, but she drowned her in that race. She going a mile, something happened in the Fintry race. Her last race was good enough as a prep. Yeah. If these connections think she's good enough to ship her here, I'm going to follow suit with her, and she draws well towards the inside, so she's where I'm going. I just think this is the best contingency of Europeans we've seen in this race in a long time. I'm sorry, like everybody, Wise Dan wasn't in here. At the risk of inciting the haters, I think he would have his hands full here. There's a lot of good Euros.
Yeah, this would have been a tough task for Wise Dan in this race, because I agree with you. This is the best group of Europeans that we've seen in this race in quite a while. They can all run. It may just come down to which one gets the best trip.
Who's the best American? What's the best to finish by an American? Who's that horse?
The best finish by an American.
I'm going to take Tom's Tribute.
I will take Summer Front, who I think is a miler.
No, listen, he and Tom's Tribute are very similar horses. The Tom's Tribute has some more upside. 1 race left, and it's the big one. It's the classic. I wish I was smart enough to have a strong opinion in here. I just don't know what to do in this race. And we're going to show a couple races for Shared Belief, who I went into this race thinking I'd be way against, and the more I look, I'm not way against him. I picked against him, but he is truly the horse to beat because I don't think the field quality is that strong. He's beaten Tosa New York easily with not an easy trip. This was on synthetic. He's a better synthetic horse, and I think that could be his undoing if he hasn't.
Yeah, maybe it could be, but he is 2 for 2 on dirt. Well, I agree with you. When I first saw the field coming together, I thought that'll be a short price that I'll just be way against. But you go through the field, and to me, it's almost impossible to be way against this horse. He's really good. He's very tactical. That the race we just looked at had a really fast pace. He sat off it, and he ran by the field in the stretch. If it's slower, he'll just sit right up on it. He can do anything, this horse.
Well, you see what he did in his next start when he won the Awesome Again at Santa Anita. I mean, he was pushed out wide the entire way. The problem I have is he's running down Fedbiz. And Fezbiz there's a 14-horse field, he'd be 18th in this race. That's a problem for me. He's meeting far superior horses than anybody's Fez, because the thing is, he had no closers to deal with in this race. Now, you want to argue and say, well, you didn't have any no closers. Imperative did win the Charlestown Classic. Majestic Harbor, I don't know where it came from, was a blowout winner of the Gold Cup at Santa Anita. I think it's a different situation, and I don't think he's that superior that 2 to 1 is the right price on him. I think the right price is closer to 3 to 1, 7 to 2.
Yeah.
I thought it was higher. He's a big player. I still have to bet against him.
Yeah, me too. The problem is, you're right. The horses that he's been running against out there, they're just not. The closers just aren't that good. I guess the question with that last race, Awesome Again, and he just beat Fedbiz, was how much was he affected, and how much weight do you put on how far he was carried out into the first turn, and how much ground he had to carry all the way around the racetrack? Did it make that much of a difference? I wanted to see him get by Fedbiz a little bit easier in that race.
It may have meant 2 lengths in there, 2 to 3 lengths. It really might have, and that's a lot. People tend to exaggerate that. That's a lot of ground. I don't know that makes him a huge favorite to win this race. Which California Chrome is going to show up? Is the California Chrome we're taking a look at winning the Kentucky Derby and running well at San Antonio Pass going to show up, though this is a different surface? Or is the one that was absolutely horrendous? I don't care he doesn't like to run inside of horses at parks. He was on a gold rail. He's supposed to have run better. I don't know. I do think he'll run a lot better in here, and I don't think he's impossible.
He is going to run a lot better in this race. He has to. His Pennsylvania Derby, to me, was an absolute disaster. He didn't run at all in there, and so he is going to run better than that. Whether it's going to be good enough, he has the race to run in this race that will beat this field, but I just don't know if we're going to see it.
Yeah, this is the Pennsylvania Derby we talked about, but we got to talk about. Candy Boy came up the gold rail. You see him in the back of the picture coming up the rail. California Chrome was nowhere chasing inside. The mighty Bayern. I think Bayern is the best horse in this race. I just don't think he's the best horse in a mile and a quarter.
Right. Maybe the most talented horse in the field, that's for sure. And he's going to make life miserable maybe for some other horses on the front end in here. I think he's going again, and everybody will have to sort of decide their tactics around him. Mile and a quarter is a big question.
And I also think Moreno has to go after him, and I don't think the California Chrome is going to be that far off on the outside. This is going to be an honest pace. Do you guys project it as an honest pace?
Yeah, we definitely project it as an honest pace, and I think that makes it tough for Bayern in this race because you're right, the horse that he has to deal with is Moreno. Moreno's maybe a mile and a quarter pushes his limit.
But he's not a
bump.
bump.
But he's a good horse.
No, I totally agree, and we'll talk about him a little bit. But first we're going to talk about Tonalist, Zevo, and a little bit of VE Day. And this is, of course, and you see on the outside, the loose horse, Wicked Strong, unfortunately, is okay. Tonalist ran very well. He had a complete change of running style after the over-aggressive ride in the Travers cost him victory. He went back to last. He had to shift lanes in here. But Zevo made the first run. I'm not so sure he doesn't make the second run this time, and I'm not sure he can't turn the tables. I thought he might have been affected a little bit more by the earlier incident than Tonalist was.
I agree with that. I think of all the horses who had problems behind Wicked Strong in there, Zevo took the worst of it. He was closest to it, and it felt like almost he had to do the most work to avoid the fallen rider in that race, and it cost him more. Tonalist had the trouble later when he tried to split horses at about the 3/16th pole. He didn't get through the first time, but he got through the second time, and I love the way he finished off that race.
The other thing about it is everybody likes Tonalist, and I don't hear anyone mention Zevo. There wasn't that big a distance between the two of them, and Tonalist is going to be about 9-2 or 5-1 in here, and Zevo is going to be 15-1. So for me, he represents value. In a race where I feel like I don't have a clue, that's why I ended up with Zevo in here.
I can't argue with it. And it's just the opposite situation, I think, of the Jockey Club, because it felt like everybody liked Zevo that day, and maybe we're a little more in his camp than the Tonalist camp, and it's reversed this time.
Yeah, it is much different. Getting back to Moreno, and I think we have to talk about Prayer for Relief, because all Prayer for Relief, who I think runs third in this race, does is show up with a good effort. This is actually runs fourth in here. Moreno got loose in the front end. I don't think that Moreno, I know from me, you've liked him, you liked him this day, he never gets the respect he deserves. He is a darn good racehorse. He ain't dealing with Bayern, though, and winning this race at 1.25 miles.
Right. He is a good horse, and I think he's, in a lot of ways, he's very underrated, but this is, to me, going this far with another speed, quality speed in the race, too much for him. I don't know what to do with Prayer for Relief. To me, he's never been good enough to win a race like this, but he shows up and he runs every time.
He's a horse that you want to use somewhere in your supers. He is a nice, honest horse for Dale Romans. I think the next horse we're looking at is a wild card, and it'd be a kind of a cool story with Jake Bayless and Rashard Lewis from the NBA owning this horse. Cigar Street, man, he came back, and he came back with a vengeance. He needed his first start. He beat the horses that came back and ran well over at Keeneland, including, of course, the horse who beat him, Pick of the Litter. I don't know if these races are going to win this race, but is he totally impossible with a good inside draw to get a decent enough trip and get it done?
He's not totally impossible. He is. It's third off the layoff for him, and so maybe that'll get him to take the step forward. He's going to have to step, I think, pretty far forward to win this race.
I agree. He's a neat horse, and he's a player in here. I went Zevo, Tonalist, Shared Belief. Toast to New York we didn't talk about. Talk about him a little bit.
I just wanted to put him in because, and I don't disagree with your take on Zevo. I've liked him right along, and I think he's dangerous in this race. I just didn't want to leave Toast to New York out of this race because, to me, he's the biggest wild card in here. He's never even run on dirt before, so you don't know if he's going to handle it, but he's way better on synthetic than turf. And his second to Shared Belief in the Pacific Classic was not a poor performance. I think he's a real wild card in here.
I agree, and I'll tell you something. They can be a horse that just likes 1 of 3 surfaces, but it appears that he's not really a turf horse.
Yeah.
So maybe he's more of a dirt-type horse that runs on synthetic because he's not a turf horse that runs on synthetic. Maybe he's just a synthetic horse, and we'll find out. And he'll run 11th in here, but he's not the worst wise guy horse in there. You got any final thoughts in this Breeders' Cup? For me, Veda is the horse that I'm looking forward to betting the most. There's a lot of horses I want to bet on this sequence.
Yeah.
I think she'll be a good price in there, and I think she has a good shot.
Yeah, the great thing about the entire 2 days is I think to me anyway, it was one race after another that were really, really tough, and I think open to a lot of different horses. You always feel like the Breeders' Cup is that way, but it usually isn't quite as competitive as this year's. I think there were a lot of wide open races.
No, I totally agree. This is a very, very fun Breeders' Cup. Looking forward to it. We appreciate your watching, and of course, good luck.